Hi, welcome back to the next episode of The Next Big Bet, a podcast series brought to you by Credent Technologies. Today, I'm here to talk to an investor, a startup investor, about the risk taking psychology. So, startup investing is inherently risky, but what makes a smart investor different from an average moderate investor, right? Maybe it's the psychology. So, let's dive into it today and talk about the cognitive biases, the decision making in investments, plus what really is there any emotions connected to it, right? So let's delve into it. I have Mr. Balasubramanian here today. Hi sir, hello, thank you for
Hello,
coming.
hello, Divya. How are you doing?
I'm good, how are you?
Good.
Hi. So we will be talking to him about his past experiences and the present experiences in startup investments. So to start with, how would you personally describe your risk tolerance in startup investments?
Um, to begin with, I was very risk averse uh, when I started my investment, not just in the startup ecosystem, even before. Uh, as a person, I'm very risk averse, but that has changed over a period of time with the experiences and also other factors like your financial situation and things like that. Now I would consider myself to be taking a little more risky investments as compared to when I started.
Okay.
So it has been a journey as far as risk is concerned.
Okay.
And I should probably congratulate the person who has identified this as the topic as psychology of risk management, because as far as individual investments are concerned, and especially in the startup ecosystem, a lot of psychology plays as compared to other risk management systems like enterprise risk management,
Yes.
where there are certain cardinal rules and there are some textbook narratives which people follow.
Yeah.
But in a personal investment and especially in a startup ecosystem, certainly the psychology of the individual plays a part.
Definitely.
And from that perspective, I think the topic chosen for this podcast is very, very relevant.
Very glad about that. So, just to continue from the question that we already had, you also said that your risk averseness like has been better now, right?
Mm.
So, do you think you've ever made any investment out of a gut feeling? Like, okay, let me do this. It's my gut feeling. I'm gonna do it. Has any investment been done that way?
Now, if you look at startup investment, I think the last mile decision making is always gut feeling.
Okay.
Uh, you may know the people, you may know the domain, you may know the idea,
Uh-huh.
but nothing guarantees that the venture will be successful.
Right.
So, in spite of all the preparation and the decision making analysis, the final yes, go or no go decision, I think, is always based on a gut feeling.
Okay.
So, from that perspective, I think all my investments have been uh, with a gut feel
Okay.
towards the
All
end of
right.
the cycle.
Okay. Because all your investments have been based on a gut feeling, do you think this risk taking and the way to even evaluate risks during an investment, is it an innate thing or is it like developed over the years or developed over the experience that you have?
I would say partly innate and
Okay.
partly experience.
Okay.
Um, there is no better teacher in life than experience.
Yes.
So all of us are wise after the experience. Um, there are certain principles that we learn,
Okay.
not only in investment but in any field, based on which we start our experiences. But the experiences teach a lot that makes us sometimes even to completely change our perspective or opinion about any subject.
Right.
So it's true for investment also.
Okay.
So there are certain key things one has to look at. That's from my experience, both in the corporate world as well as in my entrepreneurial journey.
Okay.
That one has to look at the objective of any startup is to be successful.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, today in India, more than 90% of the startups are failures.
Shut down. Yes.
So the reason for failure are many, but there are 2 or 3 things which are key among them.
Okay.
So when we look at investment in a startup, we look at the availability or the presence of these factors to take a decision. But they are all necessary conditions, but not sufficient conditions.
Okay.
So it doesn't automatically ensure that
Yes.
the venture will be successful, and that's where the gut feel plays
Yes,
a part.
I think.
So together with certain principles and gut feel, we make the decision to go for investment.
Okay.
So whatever I'm saying is more true for individual investment, not so much as institutional investment, individual
Got it.
investment, especially in the startup ecosystem.
Okay. Because you were talking about individual investors and institutional investments. So even in institutional investments, it's an individual who is investing, right?
Correct.
It's like a group of individuals who are investing.
Yeah.
So how do you think, is there a change in the mindset if you are being a part of an institution to invest and being just an individual investor putting your money in the cap table? Is there a difference?
Certainly there is a difference, because ultimately the decision making rests with the individual in the case of individual
Yes.
investor, not so in the case of an institutional investor. In the case of an institution, you're part of a team, and collectively they take a decision to whether to go for a investment or not. The positive side of that is that the probability of covering all aspects of considering the investment probabilities is higher when many heads are put
Yeah.
together. So there are some aspect which as an individual you may choose to overlook or happen to overlook, that may get overridden in institutional investment. But in the case of individual, though there are opportunities for the individual to go and discuss with people, with others, and then pick their brains and then make the decision making rests with the individual. So from that perspective, there is certainly difference between an individual investing in a company or institution investing in a
Right.
company.
It's more like the risk is spread across
Yeah,
many
the
heads
risk is
than
taken by the team in an
team.
institution.
Yeah. So there's
Here
some
it
kind of
is
confidence there, like a group confidence.
more than confidence, it's a collective decision making.
Right.
So in an institution, there are backups available. So if you look at typical institutional investments, they don't plan to get 100% success in all their investment. Some people are even happy if 20% of their investment or the organizations are successful.
Okay.
But for an individual investor, the tendency is to go towards 100%. And
Yes.
even one failure
Yeah.
hurts unless you are a large investor.
Yes.
Typically, majority of the individual investors are, I would say, possess a small portfolio, not large portfolio
one.
like an institution.
Got it.
So the probability of success needs to be higher in the case of individual investor.
Got
That
it.
that's where the psychology part
Yes,
comes
I
in.
think so, yes. And I also would like to add that in such a places where platforms like Credin would be of help, because we do
Exactly.
the all the work that is done behind the scenes. Like we
Yes,
do all
yes,
the
yeah,
like find out what is happening with the startup, what the financials are, and the
yeah,
due
yeah,
diligence and everything.
yeah,
I think that is where the platforms like
yeah,
Credin do help.
exactly.
Uh,
Exactly, the platform brings that knowledge and experience.
right.
You know, uh, you cannot learn everything by yourself.
Yes.
You will learn. You need to learn from others' experience as well.
True.
So, from that perspective, platforms like Reddin extract that knowledge from multiple sources and then place it in one place, which helps in the decision making of investment.
Definitely, it does, I guess.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So, with the little knowledge that I have in startup investments, I have seen a lot of investors coming and asking about the founders rather than the ideas. And I have also seen people investing in the founders in seeing what they have already done. Like if you take, for example, Kunal Shah of Cred, I feel like a lot of investors came and invested in Cred because he had already successfully ran Freecharge. That is his portfolio company already. Like he was there. So I feel like that effect of which is called, by the way, halo effect in psychology. How do you think is that actually affecting the investors at the moment, or how has it been growing?
Actually, I look at it a little differently. I don't believe in the halo effect,
Okay.
but the role of the promoter
Mm-hmm.
in a startup company is very, very important.
Okay.
I was mentioning that at least in India, more than 90% of the startups are failure.
Yes.
So I'm not talking only about companies that are registered and running. If you consider all ventures from a conceptualization phase, that is where the percentages stand. Uh, More than 60-70% of the ideas never even materialize.
Yeah.
That's what is contributing to this. So, when we analyze the causes for failure of these 90-95% of the organization, the number one cause is the founders. So, it's not the halo effect as such, but when an organization is started by a new entrant or a tenured person who has run an organization, there is no automatic guarantee of success there.
Okay.
The idea may be good.
Mm-hmm.
The person who has started the company may be a very successful executive in another organization.
Right.
Being an employee in one organization, even a chief executive in a company, does not automatically mean he will be successful as an entrepreneur.
Yes.
Having a wonderful idea is no guarantee that the organization will be successful. Running an organization is a completely different ball game.
Okay.
And there are, as I was mentioning some time ago, there are 2 or 3 major causes for the failure of organization, especially startups. And first among them is the founders. This is my personal experience as well as my study of the industry,
Okay.
and along with discussion with people.
Mm-hmm.
So it is very critical that the founders have certain characteristics which are good for making a venture successful.
Okay.
That need not be hollow effect. It's not their pedigree or their experience.
Okay.
It's their attitude towards the organization, how practical they are towards it, how serious they are about it, and how committed they are to the venture.
Yes.
And overall, what is their objective of starting a company? There is nothing right or wrong about all of this. That's one thing about the startup companies, and for that matter, anything.
Mm.
I can start a company only with the objective of selling it and making money. Nothing wrong
Yes.
in that.
Yeah.
But I also can have an objective of saying that this company should run for 200 years.
Yes.
That is also equally okay.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever be the objective, the founders have to have a very clear agreement between them
Okay.
on their objective.
Got it.
It is given that
Mm-hmm.
at least there are two people as invested in a startup.
Okay.
Not too many,
Mm-hmm.
not too less also.
Mm-hmm.
So ideally 3 to 4 people is a good set of founders. And one of the main reason for failure among the founders, I said the disagreement between the founders as a cause for failure is
Yes.
at some point in time, sometime it
Mhm.
starts from the beginning, there is a large disagreement between what they need to do, what is that the organization should do, and how should they proceed. So, very often there is a large disconnect between them, and
Okay.
this is one of the cause for failure of the startup.
Okay.
So, from that perspective, uh, synchronized thinking, and even if it is required, a written agreement between the founder as to how they will run the company and towards what objective they will take the company is a very essential part. So, founders play, I would say, the number one factor for success of an organization.
Okay.
So, partly to answer your question,
Mm-hmm.
not the halo
Halo
effect
effect.
part, but the role of founders in the
Mhm.
success of the organization is very critical.
Definitely. So you are also telling that when there's success, obviously investors would also be ready to invest in their companies.
Yes. See, that happens after some time.
Mm-hmm.
Typical startup, see, by I guess there is certain definitions of what a startup is.
Yes.
It's a 5-year tenure and certain
Yes.
amount of revenue and things
Yeah.
like that. So investment happens at multiple
Different
times.
stages. Yes.
So the investment post start of the organization has some view of how the organization has run so far,
Right.
what has been thinking of the organization.
Yes.
But the pre-launch organization, when they are mobilizing funds for starting the company, you don't know anything about it.
Exactly, yes.
Investors don't know anything about it. Even if the person is a very good friend, you have worked with him, for a number of years, it doesn't give any guarantee on how this organization will run.
Very
So there is one kind of decision making investors have to make pre-launch, and reasonably better equipped to make the decision post-launch. Say 2 years down the line, I want to grow the organization, I seek investment. That time when people come, they have something to look
Exactly.
and take decision.
Yes.
But pre-launch, there is nothing to look.
Yes.
So there is a difference between the decision-making process pre-launch and post-launch.
Post-launch. I totally get it. And also you mentioned
It can go the other way also. I mean, it's not necessary that post-launch you will get more investment.
yeah,
It can be the other
depends.
way.
Yes, it
And
totally
I
does.
have examples for that.
Okay. Also, you mentioned, I really liked how you mentioned, like, if you like the founder, you might go and invest, right?
Yes,
That
yeah.
takes me to the confirmation bias.
Yeah.
That is also something that, okay, if I know the person, if I know the founder, if he's my friend, I already like him, I know his attitude. So I'm pretty sure whatever he's gonna start is gonna be a success.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna go invest.
Yeah.
Have you ever felt that, or have you seen anyone feel that?
That's where the psychology part
Yes,
comes.
yeah.
It's a natural human tendency
Yes.
is to do the confirmation.
Yeah.
So in such situation, what happens is I have already made up my mind to do the investment,
Yeah.
and I try to justify that by myself.
Yes.
And it's a very, very common phenomena. It's nothing. But in my opinion, in these kinds of decision making, you have to keep yourself away from the problem. You are part of the problem, but you have to keep yourself away from the problem and look at the problem. It requires a lot of experience. It's not easy to do. So what you say happens more often than what I say. Fortunately or unfortunately, I have been able to do that.
Okay.
So not only in investment, in any problem solving situation, here also you are taking a decision.
Yes.
While solving a problem also you are taking a decision. In any decision making situation where you are involved, if you get the ability to take yourself out of the problem and look at it from outside, though it is impacting you, you will be able to take better decisions.
Yes.
So yes, in many people's case, this confirmation scenario happens, but fortunately in my case I have been able to be out of that, probably because I started late. As I said, I started my investment journey, especially in startups. The other investment during my career is a different thing, but in kind of startup kind of investment happened after I was 60, after my retirement. So I had adequate experience and consciously developed this skill of taking yourself out of your problem and then look at the problem so that you take a rational decision rather than emotional decision.
Yes.
So the ability to make rational decision is a little hard to come, and it comes only by experience. Maybe it is a innate character for some people, but that percentage is very less.
Other than the founder, what other factors do you think are being looked at for taking a rational decision rather than an emotional
Very
decision?
good question. Very good question. As I said, there are 3 or 4 top of the table factors. After the founders, number 2 is a business plan. If I have an opportunity, I would like to look at their business plan. The business plan is a fairly comprehensive documented as to how they want to go about the venture. The venture has multiple things. There is finance, there is technology, there is outcome, there is processes, there are compliances. So how are they going to, there is skill, there are people. So how are they going to deal with all of them? And I have developed with the experience of my startup, I have developed a template for startup companies. If anybody wants, I can share with them.
Sure.
So it's at a macro level, what is that I want to do in the short term, in the medium term? What kind of funding is required? Where are this money going to come from? What are the outcome? What are the success factor? What is the year 1 outcome, year 2 outcome? And very importantly, when are they going to break even and become profitable?
Yes.
So there are some thumb rules, like a services company should at most take 3 years to break even and become profitable. And when I say profitable, it's not just making profit a year. It should be sustained profitability. Consistently, they should be profitable after that. If it is a product company, they may take a little more, maybe about 5 years. So what's the plan towards that? And how are they going to sustain before revenues start falling in? So this plan is, in my opinion, the second most critical success factor for any venture. So if there is a possibility of looking at their plan, I would look at it before making an investment decision. Third thing, while looking at the plan, one will be able to assess the thinking of the promoters, and it comes more with the experience and the psychology of the individual. Even the assessment has some psychology
Yes,
built in
definitely.
into that. So to accept the plan or not to accept the plan. The third thing is there is difference between greenfield ventures and ventures where it is not the first. So if it is an existing venture, and most of my investments have been in the tech field, and so they are not greenfield.
Yes.
Most of them have existed. That domain is existing. So I would look for people with adequate experience in that domain to support them, either in the form of the founders or a person or a group of person in the executive management. They may not be founder, they may not be investor, they may not be shareholders, but they are part of the executive management team. Because in these areas, as I said, the experience is very critical for success. The probability of success increases. But in greenfield ventures, there is no history to look back. And there you have to rely on the practicality, your knowledge of the environment around that, and then take a decision. It's a little difficult. Fourth is the skill that is available. So, people are there. What are the skills that are required to do that? Because one of the cardinal rule for any startup to succeed is the differentiation. So, if you are another player in an existing field or a domain, your success depends on how different you are from others. So, how will you bring that differentiation? What is the differentiation, and how will you bring that differentiation? So, to bring the differentiation, you need to have the skill. You need to understand that. So, this is one factor that we will look at. So, if you drill deep, there will be a number of other things. But I would say the top of the table are these 4 or 5
Sounds
factors.
interesting. Yes, like you said, there are a lot of factors, but getting to know what tops the list is a big thing.
Because it's not possible most of the time to get complete clarity on all your questions, from the promoters to get an answer, nor the promoters themselves may be very much aware of that. So there is a limitation in how much of information among these things you will get before you make the decision. But then you try to get as much as possible, and in this order of priority, if you are able to assess, and then, as I said, finally put your gut feel and make a decision.
Do you think the fear of loss of money is greater than achieving more money? Is it about gains, or is it about the fear of loss?
Just as I said about the promoters having an objective about their organization or a venture, the investors also need to have some objective. So the most common objective is to multiply their money. So when you are multiplying the money, by what amount? That's also, they have to be very clear. And again, as I said, there is nothing right or wrong about it. There are people who say that in 3 years, my investment should multiply 5 times. There are some people who say that, I invest in this because I like this domain, and I am willing to wait for 5 years before I even see any returns out of my investment. So again, it's the psychology of the people and the and their disposition about their venture into investing, it's essential that the investors also have a clear objective in their mind. When you have that clear objective in your mind, the fear of losing out does not come,
Okay.
because you are not very clear whether you are losing out or not. So there is no fear.
I also think, like how you said, the investors' objectives should align with the company's objectives.
Exactly.
It's similarly, the company should also look at their investors' objectives and see if that investor would be the right person to invest in their
Now,
company.
if the company has a luxury of multiple
Yes.
investors,
Then
they
they
can
would
be
do that.
choosers.
Yes.
But most of the time, beggars are not choosers.
True.
So they are looking at the money rather than the characteristic of the investor.
Right.
So most often the founders and the management is looking at the money, not so much as what is the objective of the investors,
Right.
unless it is they are taking a large and then the objectives are dramatically different.
Yes.
And unless it is such a scenario, most of the time the company looks for money with the promise of returning it.
Exactly.
But there has been situation, even in my personal experience, where we as investors have told them, over and above the money that we are investing, this is what we want to see
Okay.
in you.
Yeah.
So it's good to have that dialogue. If as an investor you
Yes.
have any expectation beyond multiplying money, which is the primary objective, to discuss with the management and then get their buy-in. And probably they are doing something good for the industry. Yeah.
I think we'll wrap up the podcast with one last question. Just wanted to understand, how important is it for an investor to to find out what his risk appetite looks like before starting to invest?
Yeah, that an investor should know. That is where I said that's also a problem to solve, if you ask me. You can take the help of others in evaluating you by making them to ask questions.
Okay.
There are, principles in evaluating risk management. So the experts in that field can assess you and then say that this is your risk appetite.
Right.
This is what, if you see the institutions do, the banks, when you invest, they do the risk assessment.
Yes.
Another way to handle this is to go a little cautiously, which I follow generally.
Okay.
Is if I'm not very confident and I do not have so much of information, I try to invest an amount which I won't bother if I lose.
Okay.
And I'll go with a small amount. I made the decision. There is something convincing me that this is a genuine venture. I'll go for that investment, but I'll wait. So probably as a part of the initial investment, I'll put in a small amount. If it goes, I don't care.
Okay.
But if it succeeds and the venture requires more fund, probably the way it goes, because now I have some information to see how the promoters have been promoting, how the product or the service is evolving, how the market is receiving it, how is the revenue flowing. So with this information, probably I'll invest more.
Got it.
I have done that with one or two companies. So that is another way of managing the risk.
Okay.
So there are multiple ways to do it, but these are one or two, probably most proven ways of dealing with the risk.
Okay, yes, I would totally agree, especially with the second one, the trial and error
Yeah,
method.
yeah.
That a lot of people, we tend to do that even for the smallest decisions in our
Correct,
lives. We
correct,
do that.
correct,
So,
correct.
yeah, that is good to know. I think that's a really great piece of advice for all the investors out there.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir, for your time today with us.
Mhm.
I think we'll wrap up the podcast. See you in the next episode of The Next Big Bet. Thank you.